Life is a dream, time like a stream, carries our burdens away. Never despair, joys everywhere, love can befriend you today. Free from all care, like birds on the air, soar above griefs and worries, seek joy and be gay. Often on earth, things of great worth, worldly ambitions defy. Sometimes a friend helps us ascend up from life's stairs to the sky. Love is a star, though shining afar, it can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh. Love is a star, though shining afar, it can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh.
Welcome again to those of you who are joining us on our webinar broadcasting. We're coming to you from Chennai, where we're having satsang this evening. And I'd like to just share a few words about an aspect of living in community. And we do have community here, although we don't necessarily have community in the sense of a piece of property or you might say a physical manifestation of what some people call a community. We have it, I think, in what is actually probably a more real sense, because people can live very close to each other as neighbors but never talk to each other. So houses themselves do not make a community, but people working together in common core interests together, common goals together. This is really what does make a community. We share ideals, and we help one another, one helping the other. And as I was thinking about this in relationship to some of the common everyday challenges that come up, I was thinking of this particularly in relationship to a question that had come up in my mind over the last few days, over the last week, perhaps even before I came down to Bangalore for that retreat we just did. And what I noticed, one of the things looking back on Swami Kriyananda's life, and if you look also at the life of Paramahansa Yogananda, they were passionate about what they believed in and their desire to serve. I say passionate in the sense that they put full 100% energy into it. Gung-ho, and Master just epitomized that. And this is what I saw in Swami Kriyananda's life, just 100% energy in a certain direction. Yet, at the same time, they put themselves in Divine Mother's hands, as a baby would be in mother's hands. And God's will be done, and they allowed that whatever was needing to happen to play out. And they had that supreme non-attachment. And this is what the Gita is all about too, is this dynamic between doing your 100% with full vigor, full intention, but yet being totally non-attached. And this is the question that often comes up in people's minds. How can you have those two attitudes that are one counterpoint against the other? And this particularly plays itself in community. Because you find people I know in my experience of Ananda Village all these years, and with Ananda, that people are very, very passionate about ideas, and sometimes they conflict with other people, because you have two people. It's Haridas's famous saying that he had learned in the early years that there was more than one God's will, my will and your will. And each of us in our good intentions is trying to do our very best, but oftentimes they run into each other. And you multiply this by hundreds of people, and in the case of Ananda now worldwide, thousands of people we're all trying, but yet we don't always agree. Sometimes we butt heads against one another. So how do you maintain community, and also in the sense of being passionate about what you're doing, but also sometimes you disagree, and you have. And then how do you let it go and be non-attached? And many people in their thought of non-attachment, they equate it with being passive. Well, that means I'm not going to do anything and assert myself. And that's not it. But on the other hand, when they assert themselves passionately, they go overboard and they start hurling verbal bombs at one another, and particularly email. That tends itself to that. And I was reading something from Swamiji's book just this weekend, which we were discussing last Friday on our webinar, our Gita webinar. And if you want to know more about this, tune in Friday. But because we didn't finish. But Swami was talking about the qualities that he was talking the qualities that define a renunciate. Well, now a renunciate, you might say, oh, that's somebody, not me. But if you're here tonight, you are a renunciate. You want to be a renunciate, because renunciation is not the outer. Some people take it to that side, but it's the inner renunciation of me, mine, ego, and so all of us, if we're on the spiritual path, we follow the path of renunciation. And so he lists 14 qualities here of what defines a renunciate who's made some progress on the path. And he said the first 3 are, they have no or very few attachments or desires. And so, now how can you have no desires and be passionate about something? We asked that. Think about that. How do you do that? They are without anger. Well, now we can understand that. Anger appears in the heart when one's desires are thwarted. So ultimately, you're very passionate about something, but then you're thwarted and it doesn't work. What happens? You get angry. And I see this, sometimes more than I like. And they accept, the third one, they accept without prejudice whatever life gives them, and live by the principle, what comes of itself, let it come. And so now again, being accepting, it seems like that is also passive. But we know to truly practice these things takes a great deal of courage. And so I was thinking about these things, because people often find themselves confused about the two. And how do you live in this world putting 100%, but yet whatever comes of itself, let it come, and you're able to let it go. You're able to let it go. Now, that's quite a remarkable way to be able to live that way. And it seems to be against one another, principles that are in counterpoint to one another, but they're not. I was thinking about this particularly just recently when I mentioned to some friends that when I was coming on the plane to India, I had a lot of trouble. The flight was canceled, and it didn't work out, and we ended up spending 4 hours sitting on the plane, and then it was canceled another 4 hours after that in the airport, getting rescheduled, and 8 hours went, and it was very late at night. And I didn't get out of the airport. It was 5 o'clock in the morning by the time I got out of there. And everybody did pretty well, and I was quite amazed. And this was in New York City, New York Airport. And it was a flight directly to India, so it was mostly everybody was Indian on the plane. There were some Westerners, but mostly Indian. And I watched the people, how they reacted to this. And I noticed that the people were actually pretty good. They were kind of calm. They were centered, they didn't get upset. Except there was one lady, and she was an American lady. She got really upset. She started yelling and screaming and abusing the service people, how they do sometime. And she was very upset. But the rest of the people, passengers, they were calm. Now, I first thought, I said, Indian, look at that nice Indian temperament of calm, centered, but then I said, no, wait a minute. I've been in India where things have not gone right, and I've seen Indian people get really upset too. So it's not necessarily just the fact that they're Indian. But there was a correlation, because I realized when I'm in India and things don't work right, I tend to not get too reactive, because I was thinking, I'm a guest in this country. My mentality is still American. I realize I'm in a foreign country. And so when you're in a foreign country, you say, well, that's just the way it is here, and I just have to accept it. And I don't react that way. And plus, if I'm a guest, I'm a guest, and a guest doesn't get upset like that. You accept things. And I think it was the same thing. The Indians happened to be in America, and they realized, I'm a guest here. But that American lady, she was a native, you see, and so she gave herself license to be very upset and yell and scream. And I thought about that, and I thought, isn't that the case? When we're guests somewhere, we behave ourselves. But when we're in our own domain, we give ourselves license to misbehave. And I thought about that, and I thought, we should remember that all of us are, in essence, this isn't really our home. I don't mean this room. I mean this world is not our true home. We are all guests here. And I think we should remember that we live in a place as guests, and as a guest, we should remember where our true home is it's in the divine. That's where our true home is. And that as we are here, always thinking of ourselves, yes, this really isn't mine. I'm here for a while, and as I'm here for a while, I'm given dominion, or I've given responsibility for some things, and I behave accordingly as a guest here. And that sense of when you're a guest, you're slightly detached from everything, isn't it? So you can enjoy it. Yogananda would go into the beautiful buildings in New York City, and he would pretend that he walked into their mind, and he would walk about the building, and he would enjoy it as if if they were belonged to him. Then he'd walk out the building, and he would say, "I give it back," in a sense. But there was a game for him, and he was totally non-attached to it. But yet that didn't preclude him even though he was not attached, he took pains to do the very, very best he could. And this is one clue that came to me is if we can learn to live in this life with a little bit more of detachment, that it's not our true home. And we then begin, in that detachment, we're not quite so emotionally stirred to anger when things don't go right, because it's not my home, it's somebody else, it's not my world, it's Divine Mother's world. And the fact that it doesn't work, it's her fault, and we tend to remove ourselves a little bit from that. But then another image also came to mind, and this is also something to think about, of all of us as working together as a community. When I was a young man, I loved sports. I was a sports person, played sports, competed in sports, and in the early days of Ananda Village, there was most of us now that are a little bit got less hair and it's gray, we're young and vigorous and sports people, and we would, the men, particularly young men, we'd get out there and play very vigorously with games, volleyball, baseball, whatever the game would be, we'd play. And when we would play those games, I remember some of them, we'd play, we would play vigorously to win. We'd play to win, because, it's not much fun if you're not going to play to win. And so we'd play to win, and with all our heart. But then the game was over. It was all over. It was all over. You just had fun, and you just let it go. And I think this is one of the values, actually, of young people learning sports. It's not about the physical, but it's learning to win and lose, and enjoy it either way, because it didn't really matter if I win and lose. That we wanted to win, but if you lost, it didn't matter. But it was the fun of just playing, and I think this is how, as a community of people, we want to approach what we're doing. Is we want to do the very, very best we can, but realize that we're all working together. The word competition. This is something I think it'd be good for everybody in India to understand, this word competition, because I noticed the Indians are very competitive. They're competitive, and what we're trying to create is cooperation. But you know that the difference between the words competition and cooperation seem to be very much opposite, but they're not. If you understand the two words closely of what they really originally meant and mean. The word, of course, we understand cooperation, and that's, I think, a community is built upon people cooperating for each other, cooperating, working together to achieve the highest goal. In order for a community like Ananda to exist, what keeps us together? Friendship, cooperation, friends working together toward a common high goal, inspired goal, right? I mean, isn't that what a community is? Working together in cooperation toward a higher goal. And that's what I think all of us are trying to do. Now, we don't do that passively, say, well, that means I can't be competitive and try my hardest. No, it doesn't mean that at all, because you know what the word competition means. It comes from the Latin word, calm, which means together. That's a community, it's got the same root, community, competition. Calm means together, but petition comes from the word, I may have it slightly wrong, but patere, from the Latin word patere means, and roughly translated, competition means striving together. Working and striving, more than just working, aspiring together. And so in the old days, in the Roman days, empire, two athletes would compete, which meant they would strive to mutually together attain the highest. And it wasn't against each other, but it was with each other. We worked together with one another. But yet, each one uplifting and inspiring the other. And this is what competition truly means. And so this is what we do, is we compete together, each one striving to inspire the other to reach up to the highest. And I think in order to do that, you could think of it as in terms of like sports. We try, or game, playing chess with somebody, or whatever you like to play, card game. You try to win. But you realize if you don't have your opponent there on the other side, you don't have a game. And when it's all over, you shake hands, you say, that was a great game. We just had such fun together. And I think this is if we can, but in order to do this, there has to be that detachment, that being able to work together, and that little bit of dispassion of, this isn't really mine at all. This is God's world. This is God's community. This is something that I'm here for a little bit of time. I'm passing through. And really, each of us should think about this. How much time do we really have? We don't know. It could be gone next year. Who knows? We don't know. But we're passing through. And while we're passing through, Divine Mother has given us a task to do. That do it to the very, very best you can. Because if you don't, karmically, you're going to remember a little bit. Oh, I didn't quite give it my all. And you're going to have to come back to finish that. But if you do it 100%, you say, I did my best. I can leave it behind, Divine Mother. It's all yours. This is your world, not my world. And I think if we work that way, each of us striving our best, but yet working together to bring out the best in one another, but yet with a certain dispassion, so that when things inevitably fail, which they always do, you know how it is. Sometimes you succeed, but in order to get to success, you usually have to stumble a few times. You help each other up. We help each other up, and we work together. And then when one person, even one person succeeds, everybody rejoices. And that's the nice thing. I think this is what nice thing I've seen in Ananda is one person makes a success. Everybody, it's just because we all, because of the ties of friendship that we have with one another, any one person's success is our success. If we can, just like children, when one of the kids in the community, graduates and becomes a doctor or whatever, everybody said yes. We've all succeeded. It takes a village. What's that saying? To raise a child. And in the sense, when that child succeeds, we all succeed. So let's approach life that way, working together, striving together, so that we all ultimately succeed together.